Welcome to Straight from the Gavel. I'm your host, Dave Barber, coming to you today from the lounge of the Rhode Island House of Representatives. And in these segments, each and every week at this time, we like to visit with a member of the General Assembly and discuss some of the things they've been working on, some of the legislation that's happening, some of the work that's been going on behind the scenes to help make our state better. And we have a woman who's joined us before, and she's always been extremely helpful to us and very cooperative. We always enjoy talking with her. It is my esteemed pleasure to welcome back the Honorable Representative Donna Walsh. Representative, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you, Dave.
And listen, I know I don't have to ask you what you've been up to this summer, because there's a misconception, I think, among many of our viewers, quite possibly, that when the General Assembly goes into recess, that it's kind of fun and games and you're all on vacation. And I know, at least for you, that's far from the truth.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something someone asked me just recently when I was at a public forum. They said, well, what are you doing right now? Well, this is a good time to take care of many of our constituent concerns, do a lot of research on issues that we'll be working on in the upcoming session, and meet with different constituency groups. So it has been busy in that regard. And one of the things that I would like to say first off is that my office has been working, we've gotten a list of the many recipients, well, they should be recipients of unclaimed property.
Wow, yeah.
And my office has sent out letters, many, many letters to people in my district who have that unclaimed property, giving them the address and phone number to call if they do have it.
Representative, excuse me for interrupting, because this is a very important point, and I want to make sure that our viewers know what we're talking about. I know at least once a year, I believe that it comes from the Treasurer's Office.
Yes.
There's an insert put in the Providence Journal with names of people that have property that's been garnered through one form or another, often banks, accounts that have been left unattended for many years. And this money, sometimes small amounts, sometimes much more substantial amounts, are due and owing to Rhode Island citizens. What you're saying is, in your district, you've tried to extrapolate the names and try to make people aware of this. Correct.
The unfortunate part is that a lot of the addresses, we've sent out many letters, but we're getting a lot of them back. The addresses are undeliverable, and so we need to find a way to get to these people. But if anybody out there thinks that they have unclaimed property, is not sure of it, they can contact me at home. My phone number is 364-6433. It's in the newspapers, it's in the journal, and it's all over the place. But I would try really to get these people to get this property that's owed to them.
I know every time I see that insert, I always check my name.
I do too.
and
I know I don't have anything.
Well, I'm just hoping that maybe there was something, and of course I'm not lucky either, but this is kind of like Publishers Clearinghouse, because you're trying to track these folks down.
Oh.
And listen, it's essentially, I don't want to call it free money because it's theirs, but it's found money that people may have misplaced, forgotten about, somehow maybe moved and the notices didn't get to them. But I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see when all of the dust settles, what kind of feedback you get overall from your constituents, from people that were able to actually claim some of these monies. But at least you're trying to help. And people can call you if they have questions, or if they get caught up a little bit in the bureaucracy. I know too, Representative, during the off season, you and your colleagues are all concerned about the economy, all concerned about jobs. You recently hosted the governor as well as the EDC director, Keith Stokes, to tour the very historic and very lovely Charlestown business district. Tell our viewers about that. How did that go?
I think it went extremely well. I had read that the governor was visiting many different main streets in the state, and they were all in the urban areas. And I thought, well, it's time that you got down and looked at something in a rural area and in a historic district. Our main street goes back to the 1600s when it was known as the Indian Trail or Pequot Trail. Then it was known as the King's Highway before the Revolution, and then it became the Old Post Road. And actually, we even have one of the oldest operating inns, 1667, the General Stanton Inn. But I thought it would be a good idea to see a different type of Main Street and to talk to business owners and find out what their needs are. And they're not that much different from any business owner in any other part of the state, but still an opportunity for people in Charleston to feel that they were included in this process. I tried to pick out a few businesses, and we only had an hour, that were either expanding businesses, new businesses, and those were the two criteria I used. And one, a very large business, is Pat's Power that sells equipment of all types and did a wonderful business on generators. I think he sold over 100 generators in the area.
Right.
And then we went to a boutique shop that had just opened this summer, and a new business, an architectural firm, Oyster Works, and a new expanded business, the Charleston Package Store. And we have a new museum going up right on Main Street. It's one of the few town museums that will be built in this state, and it's called the Charleston Museum. Historical Society is raising money, and the governor was very impressed with that. So I think all in all, it was a good eye-opener for the governor and Keith Stokes. And by the way, Keith is coming back to meet with our Economic Improvement Committee.
Let me tell you what else is good about that. You're keeping your district, your community, top of mind with these folks. And Keith Stokes is an influential player as Rhode Island continues to evolve and businesses develop and new businesses are attracted, as well as the governor. And sometimes it's easy maybe to put some of the smaller communities on the back burner, not deliberately, but you know, again, I always tell people, Toma, top of mind awareness. And when you bring people the likes of Keith Stokes and the governor of our state to your community and show off up close and personal what you're doing, what the challenges are, that's got to be good for your district.
So we expect to have Keith Stokes back, I think toward the end of the month, and tourism is our major industry, and so I think we're going to spend some time talking about that, how to enhance it, looking at high-end tourism, the cultural, historic aspects of tourism, and so I'm looking forward to that discussion.
And then you folks, and by you folks I mean some legislators from the South County area, put your heads together collectively at a picnic where you were brainstorming and talking about legislation. What was that all about?
That was a picnic for South County legislators. It was put on by Ocean State Action, and actually it was kind of a rehash of, or recap of what we had done throughout the session in certain areas they were interested in, which one of them was the healthcare issue. And I had sponsored several pieces of legislation that they had supported. One of them was the healthy pregnancies for incarcerated women, and that related to women at the ACI who, well, we wanted to limit the use of restraints, and if any restraints at all had to be used, that they be medically appropriate restraints, and however, no restraints when it came to labor, delivery, and transport during that time period. There would be no restraints used. Rhoda Perry sponsored this in the Senate, and Representative Agello helped pass this through in the committee, and I'm sure she deserves a lot of credit for this too.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something. You know, at first blush, somebody might say, well, they may not have a lot of compassion for a prison inmate. However, we're talking about two people here.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And let me tell you something. Those restraints, even if used properly, just by virtue of design, can cause an unborn child potential problems and risk. You know, if you just think about the simple act of falling, if a prisoner were to fall a certain way at a certain time of their pregnancy, this can be extremely dangerous to that unborn child. So your legislation obviously wants to try to avoid those kinds of problems.
And that was supported by the American College of Gynecologists, and it was supported by the Rhode Island Nurses, the Medical Society. Many organizations were behind that.
And again, our goal is always to keep the people that work in jails and prisons safe too. So the proper procedures are in place to make sure that the prisoner is transported safely, the unborn child is protected, and the men and women who serve as corrections officers, they're kept safe too, right? Right.
Exactly. And that was one of the issues that came up. I think that was one of the problems we had with the legislation, but we worked it out with the ACI and they came on board with it. I mean, if a prisoner were considered to be violent, there would be a mechanism for maintaining restraint on that prisoner. So once they understood that that would happen, they were okay with the legislation.
Now, I know, too, that health care has always been a real concern of yours and one, you know, project that you seem to be continually working on. Tell our audience about the legislation dealing with the screening of newborns here in Rhode Island.
Oh, yes, that was actually that was one of the priority issues for the March of Dimes, and that's how it came to me. And interestingly enough, it also came from the ACLU. And what it does is to ensure that predictive testing is done on hormonal genetic issues, to ensure that children are tested so that a lot of heartache can be eliminated. If children are treated early, if we catch some of these issues early, they can be dealt with medically. So I think that there are 30 different tests that are used, and they're very specific, and they are all diseases that can be dealt with in infancy and early childhood, so that we can prevent a lot of the issues that come from developmental issues that result from these diseases.
Yeah, you know, and you couple that with some of the legislation that was signed by the governor this year about autism, for example.
Yes.
With the insurance paying for some of these tests, because all of the caregivers and experts say that if we catch autism early. It's going to be less expensive to the state. You're going to have better results for the child, the boy or girl. It's really a win situation for everyone. So if we're screening these newborns and we're detecting a little abnormality here or there, the caregivers and physicians can nip the problem in the bud and hopefully give the child a much healthier life, and again, preclude further problems from snowballing if it goes unattended.
Right.
That's a tremendous, you know, that's got to make you feel good, Representative, to be a part of that. I mean, because at the time you're talking about this in committee and it's going through the process, you have no way of knowing until you help that first child. And then it must all seem, all of the hard work must make it seem all worth it.
And Rhode Island has taken the lead in this area. So I think we can be proud to say, as a state, we are taking that proactive approach.
And I know too, you know, you mentioned how important tourism is to your community. Certainly the environment is important to the Ocean State, and environmental issues. And I know too, during the off season, you've been busy working and monitoring of dredging. Bring us up to speed on that issue.
Well, Charleston has had dredging done in the Charleston Breachway, which is used by all of our tourists that come to visit us. They are going in and out of that breachway. Well, it has filled in. It was last dredged in 2005. And the Army Corps of Engineers did that job, and they had an agreement with the state that the state would dredge the basin that was put in of the sediment that started to fill in. Well, we've never fulfilled that obligation, despite the fact that over the years the CRMC has put money into their capital budget to address that issue. This year the governor left the money in the budget. We lobbied with the governor on this issue and left it in. We went before the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee, to their credit, left the money in so that we now have the funds to go ahead with the dredging project. The town of Charleston also put in $300,000 to help out with this endeavor. And so now the point is we're meeting over the summer with CRMC to get this project moving. It needs to be completed by April 30th of next year. That's the window for dredging. So we know that sometimes it takes a long time for state purchasing to get through the process. So my role is to work with the town and work with CRMC and, if necessary, with the Department of Administration to get this money freed up. The bid is going out. We need to move forward in order to get it done before April 30th.
Yeah, you don't want anybody to drop the ball in this process.
No, not when we've worked so hard to get it to this point.
Now, will you be dredging? Is it a large area that will be dredged? Is it a sizable area?
It is. There is a basin that was put in to collect this so that it was in more of a concise place. And it is a good amount of dredged material. In fact, they went out Friday to actually determine how much material there was to be dredged out. And that will come out and be put on the beaches to nourish the beaches and to add to our beaches in Charleston.
Yeah, and because beaches is a force of nature. It deals with erosion all the time.
Comes out.
And I know as a former recreational boater, water levels were always important to me, and that dredging can help make the fishermen, the recreational boaters, it can make their experience a lot more pleasant and a lot safer.
Right.
If they have the proper water levels. Well, Rep, I'm sure you're going to keep an eye on that. And,
definitely.
and make sure that happens. You also did something kind of fun with school kids.
Oh.
And we've talked about this with some of your colleagues in the past, and it's always good dinner table discussion. Should students have school uniforms? You put on a mock debate involving some kids. They had to have a field day with that topic.
Oh, they did. I did it with 3 school groups last year. 2 groups voted overwhelmingly no uniforms, and the one group I was totally taken aback because their arguments in support of uniforms was overwhelmingly they voted to have uniforms in this one school group. I usually tell the teachers ahead of time, prepare them. If they're going to get up and to take part in a debate, they have to have something to say. They can't just say, I don't want uniforms, or I do or I don't. And usually they are well prepared. They come in and they're thrilled with the idea of, well, they can't wait to vote. But when their teachers take part in the debate and their parents start to take part in the debate, it gets to be even more fun. But I think it's a worthwhile experience, and I get letters back, and that's one of the high points of the trip to the State House, is the mock debate. And of course, they also like the picture in the governor's office where Washington looks at you and follows you around the room. Oh, yeah. So those are the 2 things I hear in the letters.
The Gilbert Stewart
the Gilbert Stewart picture.
I still haven't figured out how his toe and eyes always follow you in the stateroom.
I know.
You know what's great too, because it not only lets the kids get involved in a systematic and orderly debate, but it teaches them a little bit about the process. It gets them motivated, and certainly it's a topic that all kids have a feeling for one way or the other. Just yesterday I was driving by St. Raphael's School in Pawtucket, and I saw the students coming out of a school building with their purple shirts and the khaki trousers, and they look so orderly and so presentable. And I was impressed with how neat, and not to give an unfair plug to St. Raphael's, we have a lot of great schools in Rhode Island, but I'm sure the kids really enjoyed talking about that, because it's something that, it's a hot and cold topic. You know, it comes up for discussion, I know, in the General Assembly from time to time. And the kids had to really enjoy that.
Yeah, and another topic I sometimes use is extending the school day another hour.
Oh, I bet it would be hard trying to find the kids to argue the side in favor of it.
Well, actually, there were a few that did. So you get some kids that really have some good thoughts.
You know, we talked a little bit earlier about the environment and how important it is to Rhode Island. You've done something, in fact, you've been invited to attend a conference in Oregon that deals with product stewardship.
Right.
Obviously, they think a lot of you, or they wouldn't have invited you to come to Oregon to make your presentation. What is it that they want to learn from Representative Donna Walsh?
Well, product stewardship, just briefly, is a waste management strategy in which everyone who's in the chain of command, from, say, the manufacturer down to the retailer, to the consumer, to the recycler, is a part of the solution to disposal of those products. And that's just real quick, brief thing about this. We did pass a resolution in 2009 to have DEM come through and develop some recommendations, and we hired the Product Stewardship Institute to do that. We got their report, and this past year we drafted some legislation that would deal with that. It would be a framework a framework to deal with a variety of different products. And unfortunately, and I think we made a mistake when we put products into it. We put in medical sharps, mattresses, and paint. And those three products were products that would eventually have a plan developed for them, involving the manufacturers, the retailers, all of the people in that chain of command. It didn't pass. And I guess I'm going there to talk about our legislation and
how they can avoid making the same mistake.
Yeah, exactly. They want to know how, because we have the state of Maine with legislation, a framework legislation in this area. Oregon and a few other states have tried to get the framework passed, and they have not been able to do so.
Well, I hope they pay close attention.
So we're going to have a discussion. It will be an informal discussion on that with the audience there.
Representative, I know sometimes good legislation is the result of bad circumstances.
Yes.
I know public safety is in the forefront of everyone's mind, and people want their communities to be safe. Right. People want the roadways to be safe. You were touched this past year by something very significant that happened in your community that resulted in some legislation called Collins Law. Tell our audience about that. It's important.
Collins Law came about because of a young woman who hit Colin on a motorcycle by she went through a red light. She had 29 to 30 violations. Actually, I'm not sure we know how many she did have because of all of the communities. There was no kind of coalition to put together how many violations she had. And the second thing is she was mailing most of those in. So we passed legislation this year that would prohibit mailing in that third traffic violation, that you would now have to appear before a judge in the municipal court or in the traffic tribunal. And that way, the judge would be able to pull up the total record and see that, gee, this person has really been an irresponsible driver. And that's the second piece of this legislation. The year before, we had put in legislation that required that on your fourth traffic violation in an 18-month period, you would have your license revoked or suspended for a year, and plus a $1,000 fine and community service. And
now that's teeth in the law right there.
Now but we really couldn't enforce that original law because of the mail-in issue.
Right.
And the traffic tribunal brought that up, that the law is really too difficult to enforce until you pass that third violation. So we started with one, we improved on the law that we had passed the previous year, and that's where we are right now.
And this young Colin Foote, to make matters worse, I mean, it's already bad enough, certainly, with his tragic death. Wasn't his family or one of his family members
Yes.
like driving behind him in the family car or something and was witness to this horrible,
Yes.
horrible tragedy?
Yes, his mother and his brother were right behind him. And
I know, I had a chance recently to meet his father, and he's a very, very nice man, an interesting man, very, very interesting guy. You're going to hold some public safety forums, or a forum with Mr. Foote, are you not?
yes, we have been talking about this. We're in the process of planning something. He's very interested. They have the Collins Law Foundation, and they are interested in installing traffic cameras, traffic light cameras at various locations in the state, beginning in Charlestown at the very location where his son was killed. Our town is behind that legislation. So he's looking to share that information that he has with other cities and towns in the state. So we're looking to address that issue. And then there are some other issues. I've contacted the Attorney General's office last week about holding a forum on just what can we do to make our roads safer? And have some discussion. It's not a committee that I did through the House. It's just something that I was interested in looking at. So over the next few months, I think we're going to try to set something up on that topic as well.
Now, will these cameras that you're talking about be designed in such a way to catch people that are running red lights?
Yes, yes, they would record them. Now, they have them in Providence, you know. I'm not sure if they're anyplace else in the state, but they do affect behavior.
Yeah, psychologically.
Oh.
The driver knows, hey, look it, I would normally zip through this kind of yellow amber light. And they may indeed think twice. And again, we're talking, Rep, about possibly saving lives. Right. Is there anything more precious than that? We have so many things to talk about, and I want to make sure I get to this. You want to make sure that the tax breaks the state is dishing out, that they're worth it, and that we're getting a good bang for our buck.
Right.
What's happening with that? Bring our viewers up to date.
Okay, I did submit legislation in January about the 6 or 5 corporate tax credits that we give to businesses. We have we've given $144 million in tax credits since 2008 through 2010. And we don't really know whether those tax credits are producing the results that they were meant to produce. The reason was that the Department of Labor and Training was given the information on the number of jobs created, the salaries, the benefits, all of the information that's needed to assess whether these are actually working. And they were not allowed to give out that information because it was confidential according to the federal government. So when I put the legislation in, I wrote it so that the Department of Revenue would have access to that information. So now we're going to know? Now we're going to know. And I noticed Keith Stokes there was something in the Providence Business News with Keith Stokes mentioning that we're looking at transparency in terms of the tax credits we give to businesses.
Hey, listen, just keep their end of the bargain. You said if we give you some help on the tax side, you'd create jobs. Now prove it, put up or shut up. Now you have a mechanism to monitor that. The public will know. That's good legislation. We're out of time, Representative, I'm sorry to say. I know you've been extremely busy during these summer months. I want to thank you so very much, as always, for being our guest.
Thank you, Dave. I enjoy it.
And most importantly, thanks to you for watching. We're here each and every week. My name is Dave Barber. Remember, you heard it straight from the Gavel.